All right, Techno Studs, let's learn how to put RJ45 connectors on the end of a cable. All right, let's take a look at some of the equipment that you're going to need in order to accomplish this. First of all, I've got the crimper here, and this is a must in order to accomplish this job. And then I've got the RJ45 end, and of course, the cable that I'm going to put it on to. And then I also have a little cheat sheet here, and to make sure that I get the pinout correct on the ends of the cable here. And then I've got something that will take the sheath, the outer sheath off. And this is not necessary. There's some other ways that you can do it, but makes it a little bit handier. You will need something to cut it. This is not a standard pair of scissors. This is what is called snips. And so we're going to use the snips to cut the cable. And they're pretty strong. So all I have to do to use snips is just cut it like that. So they're pretty powerful. And then finally, one thing that I should have is a tester to test it at the end. And so I've got the tester over here. So let's jump into this now. The first thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to remove the outer sheath from this. And so I do have my tool here. So I like to go maybe a couple inches down, and it runs around just like that. You just twist it. And what it's doing is it's cutting the outer sheath. There's a certain razor blade that's in here, and it's cutting that outer sheath without cutting into the wires. And so it doesn't completely cut all the way through, or it cuts most of the way through. So you got to put a little pressure in order to pull this off afterwards to break that final little amount. You wouldn't want it to cut into the inner sheath or the little plastic that goes around the cables, because then you could short out one of the cables, or it's going to cause some problems with it. So when you pull this off, you want to make sure that you have not cut into these wires at all, or the protective layer around the wire. If it does, then you may need to make an adjustment to your tool to make sure that it doesn't cut into that. All right. So the next thing that I have is if I need to take, perhaps I need to take this further down, what I can use is this little filament that is sticking out here. I like to give it a little cut here. And if I do that, then I can actually take this and pull it down and take more of the sheathing off. And so now I can just take this off like that. So that's not typically something that you need to do, but something that you can do if you need to. For me, I'm just going to want to make a clean end here. And so I'm going to take that off right there. I'm going to, once again, take my sheath cutter and go a couple inches down, and then I'll peel that off. Takes a little bit of pressure in order to do that. I don't need this filament because I don't need to take any more of the sheathing off. So I'm going to cut that sheathing off right there. And now I see my 4 pairs that are here. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to start breaking out the 4 pairs into the pattern that it's going to need to fit into my connector. So the next step to do this is I am going to have my little cheat sheet here. Sorry, it's not in color for now, but it does have the little O's down here for orange. So the first conductor here, the first cable or wire that I have here, the first wire, the pin 1 is going to be white orange. So it's going to be the orange. So I'm going to move and adjust the orange to be on the left-hand side here. Now, as I'm working with this, I want to make sure that this is not too twisted up in here, because that's going to make it difficult later on. So right here at the base, when it comes out, I want to make sure that there's no twist down there. So I've got the orange there. The next one in there is going to be green, and the green actually gets split up between the blues. So the white green and the green are going to be straddling the blue in the center. So I'm just going to move this off to the side here, move the blue to the center, and the brown is going to go on the outside. Now I have my cable set up the same as my little cheat sheet here says. And then what I can start doing is I can start unraveling these. And once again, I'm going to unravel them until they're just right to the sheathing that's right there. I don't want to get it untwisted below that, because then that's going to start attacking the integrity of the signal. And so I want it to be unraveled right there where the sheath is at. That is important, but I don't want it to go any further. And so now, once I've got now the brown separated out, I like to take my thumb and run along here, and I do it so it is has a slight bow to it. You can see that it has a bow and arches just a little bit. I'm going to move that so we can get a good view of this. So now you see how I'm arching these cables. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the orange right here. I'm going to untwist this. I'm going to untwist it to the part where it is definitely untwisted right there where it meets the sheathing, but no further past that. And I need to make sure that my white orange is first, and then my orange is next. That solid orange is next. And then I'm going to take the greens and I'm going to untwist those. Once again, untwist it down to where it gets the sheathing and not past that. And when I get to that point, I want the white green to go to the left and the solid green to go to the right. So once again, I'm matching my pattern on my cheat sheet there. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the blue. Unravel that. And I want to untwist it down to the point where it gets down to the sheathing. Not much past that. So then I'm going to run my finger along there, make it all nice and smooth. See, when I'm running my finger there, what it's doing is it's taking that cable and smoothing it out. Now, this one, the pattern you can see, it is white, orange, orange, white, green, blue, white, blue, green. So it's toggling between the striped and the unstriped. So I actually got the blues flipped around, so I need to flip them so they're like this and make sure they're not crossing each other right where it comes out of that sheathing. So I might need to be doing some adjustments. And one reason why I splay it out like this is because it helps me manage all the different colors, and I don't see color all that well. So this helps me make sure that I'm not twisting any of those pairs. And so now I've got it all splayed out and in the proper order that they need to be. I might need to do some adjustments here just to make sure that if I pinch here, I want it to be relatively flat. I don't want cables to be pinching each other. So I just kind of work it a little bit. And I've learned this over experience, that just working it a little bit will set you up for success. So that way when you put this into the jack, it's not going to get crossed, or none of the colors are going to get flipped. So I work it by kind of pinching the bottom here and just making sure they all fall into their proper line there, and then also making sure that the wires are all smooth. And when I'm ready, what I'm going to do is I'm going to collect these all and put them all together and massage them, almost massage them so they're in a straight line, and then I'm going to put it into the connector. And of course, I've actually got to cut some of the excess off, so I will be cutting the excess off. So I don't do the next step until I'm really ready to do it all in one motion or in one kind of setting, because once again, I want to make sure I don't end up crisscrossing any of these wires. So I'm going to take it now, and I'm going to take the fan and put it all in one straight line, making sure that once again, they don't cross. So when I'm taking the fan, I'm pushing it all together, and then I'm pinching the bottom so they don't lose their spot, but I grab the top and I here is the massage that I go through, twisting them around just enough to get them seated. I don't want to like stress the wire, so I'm not going to twist it too much, but I'm going to get them all in line, and you can see how they're starting to fall all in line right there at the base. So, now what I'm going to need to do next is I've got them all in line and ready to, we're going to need to insert it into the RJ45, but this is way too long. If I were to put these into the end of the RJ45, you would actually have a lot of crosstalk and your data would not be clean data. So what I want to do is I want to cut this. I need to figure out where I'm going to cut it. And so to figure out where you're going to cut it, I'm going to take a look at the connector, and you can see that there is a little wedge on the connector. And that wedge, what it does is it pushes down over onto the sheathing. So I want that wedge to actually crimp that sheathing just a little bit. And so I'm going to line up. I'm also see that right after that little wedge, it starts tapering within there. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want the sheathing to go past the wedge, but not into where it starts tapering. So I'm going to now line that up. I get it on the side here and line it up so that way I can get that sheathing right where it starts tapering, and then I pinch the end on the that lines up with the end of the RJ45 connector. So I line those two up. So once again, I got the sheathing where I want it to be, and I'm pinching the very end where I want to cut it, which is going to be the end of this connector. So now that's all lined up. I'm going to take my pair of snips and I'm going to cut it across here. And those wires like to go everywhere, and want to make sure that that's completely even. So they're nice and even, flush. Now what I need to do is pin one is that first white orange. And so what I'll need to do is line it up with the pin one of this RJ45 connector. So as you can see, I hold it up to my diagram to make sure I've got it the right way. I wouldn't want to flip it around. This little tab here lets me know which way it's supposed to go. So the tab is on the back side with this diagram, so I flip it around so that this is facing up right here. And now when I push into here, I'm going to just gently guide it in, making sure none of my cables cross. And there's little channels within this RJ45, and so those cables find their little home. And then I give it a little twist back and forth, just like this, to make sure it's all seated. I also look on the end, and you should see those cables. You should see the shiny end of the cables there. I also look on the side and make sure that it's pushed all the way to the end. So I'm going to actually check this real closely and make sure that I've got all of those ends that are going all the way to the end of the RJ45 connectors. Once again, I'm looking for the shiny dots right here, and I'm looking at the edge here to make sure it's all the way at the end of that little channel, and that all of the connectors are at the end of that channel. All of the wires are at the end of the RJ45 connector now. So now I can take this, and this crimper actually has two parts to it, the RJ45 end to it and the RJ11. So I need the RJ45, and the little tab goes into this little notch down here. So I'm going to put that in there. Once again, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm careful. Oh, I do need to open this up. So this right here has a little locking mechanism on there. So I push that down, the locking mechanism pops up. So now it's ready to accept this connector in here. Once again, if I wanted to lock that, I could just push that down and it locks it into place. So what I'm going to do is push this into here, make sure it's seated well. I could double check those ends again, make sure that they're all the way there. The other thing too is I want to make sure my sheathing is all the way up to where that that taper happens. And so once I make sure I've got all of those elements there, then I'm going to crimp it down, and I like to give it a good nice crimp on there, and then pull it out. And I can see that now that wedge is now pushed down into that sheathing. So now it's a nice tight seal right there. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to want to test this, although I have to have both ends on here. So I'm going to put an end on the other side so that way we can test this. All right, now that I've got both ends on this, I've got the same ends on this. So this is a straight through cable right here. If I wanted to make a crossover cable, then I'd have to switch the green and the orange. And so that's a T-568A. So I'd make a T568A on one side, a T568B on the other side. This is just a straight through. So I'm going to test this as a straight through cable. So I'm going to click this side into this connector. And then the other side, I'm going to connect into my tester right here. And then what I'll do is I'm going to turn it on. And when I turn this on, it's testing a T568B. And the C means there's continuity. And the T means that there is no crossover cables within here. So it first of all tests to see if you even made a good connection, and then second of all, if the cables fell into the right spot. And this is checking everything passes, and it's giving me a passcode, so everything is good on this. By the way, each one of these, that is your different connectors in there. So, all right, now that everything is passed, just a note that if yours didn't pass, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I'd say probably more than 50% of my students don't make a good cable the first time they run through it. And the reason is because there's a lot of little things that can go into this. There's a lot of little variables, and if done wrong, there's a good chance that your cable is not going to work. That is why I'm very deliberate in all of those steps that I do to up my chance of being successful on making a good cable. If you didn't make a good cable, not a big deal. Just clip off the end and go through the process again. I hope these videos are really helping you out. If it is, could you hit that like button?